Our ancestors did everything they could to ensure our people survived, and we must continue to do the same.
As time goes on and we learn more about the COVID-19 virus, there is so much information out there and it changes rapidly.
Together, we can stop the spread of misinformation. And when looking for information regarding vaccines, let's continue to be diligent about our safety and protection of our nations.
It is very important to be educated about COVID-19 from proper sources. Help stop the spread of misinformation. Learn the facts. Get protected.
COVID-19 proactive measures are hard, but we need to remember they're an act of love for ourselves and those around us. We do this so no one is missing from our big house when the pandemic is over.
As Indigenous people, we have the power to stop COVID with knowledge and determination. It is important that we take this task very seriously and work together. So please protect yourself and your loved ones with proper understanding of what you need to do to avoid COVID and how we can beat it with vaccines.
This brings hope, a new light for us to be able to gather once again and continue to be strong, resilient. Let's continue to be kind, be cautious, and be safe. Hi, hi.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cedric Grealahu, and I'll be your co-chair for this meeting, or your chair for this meeting. I just want to take a second to welcome everyone and remind you that we are streaming from the unceded Algonquin territory here today. Take also a moment to thank the Afen's Women's Council and the different women that participated in spreading the message and giving that good energy off for our meeting. So I want to welcome you to day 2 of the Assembly of First Nations COVID-19 virtual forum, sharing lessons learned and supporting a new path forward. Ed Sackney, our knowledge keeper from day 1, sends his regrets due to the fact that he is in ceremony today. However, we are very lucky to have knowledge keeper Gwen Point, also from the Assembly of First Nations Knowledge Keepers Council, who has graciously agreed to open up our meeting in a good way. So, for opening our meeting, Knowledge Keeper Point.
Hiatalatal elata and shashko at the homo to squee, how camillum called a homo to stallo, to iatalatal musquium slewatu squamish. My traditional name is Shashkoit, and the language we speak is Halkamilum. And I'm here in relatives' territory, Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh. And I really appreciate being able to spend some time this morning welcoming you to the second day, as our host Cedric explained, about the lessons we've learned and a path forward after this very difficult year and a half with COVID-19. And that really is how we can move forward, is through our stories. In our language, we say "shwachwayam," and they're stories of the distant past. And they were stories that taught us about creation and lessons for our children and future generations. But we also have a term called squawquel. Squawquel is true stories. And again, it's stories to help us about, again, it's lessons learned. And we come from an oral tradition, and I'm just grateful that we still have that. And that's exactly what this forum is about. To Iatalatal to Afen, to Iatalatal to the Women's Council, to the Youth Council, and to our Knowledge Keepers Council. And together with the knowledge put together in a basket. That's really our wealth. That's really who we are. So I thank Afen to it. This and how and Stolo is raising our hands, is saying thank you. But it's also welcome. So welcome you to this forum, and to it also squalqual to squallowan. The ATI is to squallowan. Let's a thala to squallowan. Quom tomata quom to thala to squallowan. To it also. We move forward in a good way, squallowan. That's really how we do business. You can do everything backwards, but if you have that good mind and good heart, one mind and one heart, and a strong mind and a strong heart, to squallowan with good feelings. The elders say you can do no wrong. So this is important work that's going to happen yesterday, important work that happened yesterday and again today. And I thank each and every one of you. And I'd like to ask special blessings on our host, to Iatalitzel on our leadership with Afen, to Iatalitzel on the councils, elders, youth, knowledge keepers, and to our families and our communities, asking special blessings on each one. And I tell the people, it's one thing to have prayer and ceremony, but I ask everyone to accept the prayers that come your way. Far too often we give and we give and we give, and we don't know how to receive. Today I'm asking you to receive. We need that peace of mind. We need that peace of heart. And you get that through prayer, through ceremony. And with that, I'd like to sing our song here and from my territory, Stolo Nation, that was given to us by one of our leaders who fasted 4 days. And the night before their last day, their lodge door flew open and song after song after song came in. And there's another man that fasted with him, and he asked that man for this song for the Stolo people. And again, that song and ceremony connects you to the Creator. And there's no greater feeling than that connection. There's no greater medicine than that connection. So I'm asking each and every one of you to receive that. And I know a lot of you understand the Spirit does not know distance or time. So I ask again, special blessing. I give thanks for the special blessings and for each one of you. I thank you for your good work. And this is the song. Oh, 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 ho, 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 ho. Ito. I just yeah, have a good day.
Thank you, Knowledge Keeper Walalan, for those messages. And I think it's important to say that, yes, during this past year and a half, having a good mind and a good heart were absolutely necessary to the well-being of our communities and our nations. So thank you for bringing that up and sharing that knowledge with us. Walalan. So now I'd like to welcome you to the start of day 2 of the Assembly of First Nations COVID-19 virtual forum, sharing lessons learned and supporting a new path forward. Again, this gathering is an opportunity to share and celebrate the community resiliency, the lessons that we learned over this past year and a half, and also addressing some of the ongoing challenges together, as well as talking about what's needed when we want to build this new path forward following this new way of living. There's 5 goals to this gathering, which we continue to go through in our 3 days. The first one is to share community-led responses to the pandemic, which we saw in day 1, with using of traditional means, but also of modern means to come together as a community and really share that energy and keep going forward together. The second one is to highlight the strength of partnerships, which we also saw on day 1. We're using different partnerships with other communities, other nations, but also with provincial, territorial governments, municipal governments, and even the federal government, and how coming together offer different solutions to address this situation. The third point is to identify opportunities for working with and supporting populations who are most impacted by the pandemic. This is what we're going to be seeing today. We'll go through the agenda a little bit later, but we have quite a panel set up for you. You also wanted to talk about what building back better is. We'll start talking about that today, but really get into it on day 3, which is this Thursday. And finally, we heard from Indigenous Services Canada on their pandemic response and the recovery work that's upcoming. We talked about different funds, we talked about different initiatives, and we had Dr. Valerie Gideon here to tell us a bit of what was to be expected going forward. As I said, for day 1, really focus on community-led initiatives, focus on the importance of partnerships and data, and also getting that update from Dr. Gideon. Today, we're going on towards more oriented towards the frequently asked questions. What are some of the things that we still don't understand, maybe that we need a little clarification on? So we have a good guest here to introduce us that topic. All right, I'm being informed that we're having technical difficulties on our English stream. So our French brothers and sisters, you've been hearing everything, but we'll be taking a short pause and coming back once we've addressed this issue. Welcome back, everyone. First off, sorry for that. It is one of the realities of online forums. We had a bit of technical difficulties, as you can imagine, but we are back. Just to inform you that we will be skipping Dr. Sarah Funnell's presentation, and our staff is going to work with Dr. Funnell either to prepare a video on what she was going to present, or maybe see if we can reschedule her during our final day. So we'd like to thank Dr. Funnell for her flexibility in collaborating with us and offering that. Also, we did go through opening prayers with Knowledge Keeper Gwen Point. It was really beautiful, and it should be available on our video on demand on the website after this event. The French version was active and live, so that should be available for all others. Again, Knowledge Keeper Gwen Point, who shared her wisdom with us, and really would like to take the time to thank her. So we're somewhat still on schedule, surprisingly, with all those modifications. So I'd like just to remind you, if ever you do have any questions, top right hand of your screen, there's a little waving icon. Click on that, send your questions. All of our questions will be moderated by our staff, and those that we don't get to today will be answered later. For those who are listening on the teleconference, you can send your questions to the email at covidforum@afn.ca. And again, for those who are having technical difficulties, if ever it happens on your side this time, 1-833-236-8324. And this is going to be available until 3 p.m. at the end of our meeting. So now to go into our first presenter today, on the theme of building on innovation, recognizing opportunities, identifying innovations, opportunities for working with and supporting populations who are most impacted by the pandemic. We will be beginning with a presentation on COVID-19 communications by Ms. Shawnee Gwynn, who is the founder and managing partner of Gwynn Communications, an Indigenous-owned, led, and staffed public relations agency. Gwynn Communications was established in 2016 and operates out of Edmonton. Shawnee is a sixth-generation Métis woman and a descendant of Michelle First Nation. Shawnee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cedric. Tanse, hello, I am Shawnee. Thank you, Cedric, for that introduction. I'm here to talk a little bit about Protect Our Elders and Your Health, Our Strength, which were two communications initiatives led by Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation and that my agency supported. Just have the next slide. So Chief Tony Alexis and I were to present today. Unfortunately, Chief Tony could not be here, but I thought I would still introduce him and tell you a little bit about him. So Chief Tony Alexis is the chief of Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation. He spent more than half his life serving his community as an influential leader and advocate. He's won multiple leadership awards and continues to build economic opportunities for his people. Chief Tony prioritizes his leadership platform on 5 fundamental principles: maintain identity, language, customs, and traditions, protect treaty rights, create opportunities in First Nation communities, improve housing and infrastructure, and strengthen community spirit. Chief Alexis, like I said, is unable to be here, but we were both really looking forward to sharing our presentation with you today. So Chief Tony and I have been working together since I started my company in 2016. We've been working on elevating his media presence and providing advice and assistance with crisis communications and media events for the nation. And now more recently moving into communications health awareness campaigns. Can I have the next slide? So Protect Our Elders was the first campaign that we really went into together, a bigger, larger project. The need was that Chief Tony came to me early in the pandemic, knowing something had to be done about the number of young people in his community that were not taking COVID precautions seriously. He spoke with other leaders who were also noticing this same issue with youth, and they were sort of coming and going and putting elders on the nation at risk. So Chief Tony reached out to some of the folks at the federal government that he had relationships with about funding a communications campaign specifically to target Indigenous youth nationally. He knew he wanted to get buy-in from some Indigenous mentors, so he came to me with a few in mind, and he was able to secure a limited budget with the feds, and we were asked to put together a strategy to reach as many youth as possible. Can I have the next slide? So from there, we built out a strategy. We did a little bit of research with the limited time that we had. I mean, it was a pandemic, and so we had to move quite quickly. What we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that whoever was delivering the message would be an effective spokesperson for our demographic. We realized that the updates we were already doing with Chief Tony on Facebook Live were not reaching youth. So when Chief came to me, he had asked that we work with Ethan Bear from the Edmonton Oilers, Zach Whitecloud from the Vegas Knights, and Ashley Callingball, a model and actress from Enoch Cree Nation. He then identified also the national chief at the time, Perry Bellegarde. So I worked to bring in another woman influencer, and we were able to secure Serene Fox, who is part of the LGBTQ2S+ community, is an advocate and actress. From there, we identified our reach would be maximized if we had buy-in and support from other Indigenous influencers. So we reached out to Marika Sela, James Jones, James Makokis, Anthony Johnson, Delaney Tutusis, Neeland Kiknosway, and Fawnwood. The tone had to be serious in nature for the first phase of the campaign. We were just learning about the virus and what it meant for our communities. Many youth are close to elders and know the importance they play in our world. Their knowledge and connection to culture is passed down to community members, and they are our living libraries. So we played the message on there. We needed youth to know what was at stake with the risks they were taking. We knew most youth had connection to social media, so our focus laid heavily on a presence online through a website as a hub, and then videos and graphics to grab their attention, not only through Alexis's accounts, but through the accounts of our role models and the influencers who were engaged in the campaign. We brought visitors to our page with the promise of a Zoom call with one of the role models if they entered a contest. And we also encouraged youth to use the hashtag to share what they were doing to protect elders in their communities. We built out an engaging graphic that was bold, and we also built out an extensive social media content calendar and boosted posts with paid ads with the limited budget that we did have. And we targeted Indigenous communities across Canada. We wrote scripts for the main role models and coordinated video shoots close to where each role model was located in the country in order to limit the risk of COVID transmission. The audio from these radio videos were also used as radio PSAs for Wind Speaker. We engaged social media influencers to post and send their videos to us in between launching the videos for Ethan, Serene, Zach, Ashley, and Chief Bellegarde. Those videos were highly produced and more professional in nature. And then we gave the influencers the freedom to create their own videos, but asked them to cover certain points and provided them with a communications toolkit that they could access to post videos, graphics, and pre-written posts. That gave a more organic feel and was helpful in engaging their already overly engaged audiences on TikTok and Instagram. We also sent out a news release and pitched to some media outlets. It was well received at the time and was also highlighted by Dr. Dina Hinshaw during one of her many updates that were very well attended online during the beginning of the pandemic. Can I have the next slide, please? So here's a couple of snapshots of everybody that was involved in both phases of the campaign. I'll talk about our results shortly, but once the first phase was complete, the federal government was so pleased with the success of the campaign that they asked us to build on it. For the second phase, they reapproved another budget for us, and they asked us to help encourage COVID precautions over the colder winter months and holiday seasons, as cases continued to climb with people eager to gather with loved ones indoors. This was expanded to an older audience, but still included youth across the country. At this point, I knew community members were getting really tired of hearing about COVID and what to do. People were really missing gathering and being together. So I took an approach to reach our audience through humor. One thing I know about my own family and my community is that we use humor as medicine and to get through the hard times. We engaged Indigenous comedians, Candy Palmader, Dakota Raymond, and Dane Cunningham. As well, we reached out to all of our Indigenous role models and social influencers from the first campaign. We provided comedians with key messages and points to cover, but gave them the freedom to create 3 skits each about proper hand washing, mask wearing, social distancing, and limiting indoor gatherings. The results were fantastic. Social influencers shared the skits and other graphics to help boost the content. We added Kendra, Jesse, and Bridget Laquette to our list of helpers. This phase utilized social media in a very similar way, but we also did a harder push on media relations and were able to secure national coverage for the campaign. Some of the PSAs were also used in partnership with APTN and were run as TV spots for a few months. Can I have the next slide? The campaign was really successful. The first phase reached over 1.1 million people and gained the attention of several interested parties within the federal government outside partners. The second phase of the campaign reached over 13 million people, and the engagement on the posts were overwhelmingly positive. People were responding to the humor and seeing themselves in the content and the style of Indigenous humor. Indigenous people want to see themselves, how they talk, what they think is funny, people they admire in these types of campaigns. The messages were resonating, and community members across the country were noticing the campaign. Due to the success of the campaign, we learned that other First Nations were now able to partner with the federal government in very similar ways through funding and run their own campaigns that they were informing and developing themselves, which we saw as one of the biggest successes of all from this Protect Our Elders campaign. The Protect Our Elders campaign also just recently won an IABC award, which is an International Association of Business Communicators, for the Award of Excellence. Can we have the next slide, please? Our newest campaign is Your Health, Our Strength. We had to roll it out almost immediately after the last phase of Protect Our Elders. The new vaccine was coming to Canada, and there was a need to inform Indigenous people so they felt they could make their own decisions about the vaccine. Given the history, it was understandable and widely known that Indigenous people would be hesitant to trust something that might be seen as experimental, especially given the governments were prioritizing First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities for the rollout. May I have the next slide? So our first thought was to connect Western and traditional medicine and how they work together. But in order to validate that, we engaged the elders. So we went and interviewed elders, got their perspective, and actually ended up getting our key messages directly from them. They quickly became the spokespeople of the campaign, sharing teachings with community members across across Alberta. They shared how the vaccine works based on their own cultural knowledge. We also engaged Indigenous doctors to share the facts about the vaccine. It was important to us at this point of the rollout that this campaign was strictly about awareness and building out information so that Indigenous people located in Alberta felt that they had the tools and information they needed to make informed decisions about getting vaccinated. This was not a campaign focused on action or changing minds, but to connect Indigenous people with faces and voices they actually knew and could hear their stories. In our research, most people turned to family and trusted friends for information on the vaccine, so this seemed like the most logical strategy. We used digital, print, and traditional media. We pushed the information out regularly and frequently, from myth-busting to informational and testimonial videos, to printed flyers and posters for door-to-door. Stickers were printed out and given to folks that received their vaccine, and a backdrop for selfies to post on social media with the hashtag. We made all of the toolkit available on the website, and it is also customizable for all First Nations in Alberta and beyond if they choose to use it. All they have to do is just download the graphics and add their logo to provide to their nations. Next slide, please. So we are just on the last phase of the campaign, so we don't have our results at this time to share, but we are moving into targeting a younger demographic, and we are also now moving the campaign into an action-driven campaign. We're hoping to encourage more people to get the vaccine at this time. And the next slide. So what we learned, I felt weird writing this, but it was more of confirming things we already knew. So these campaigns helped us solidify that First Nation people are more likely to trust and engage in information directly from their community. Nations do not need non-Indigenous experts to run successful campaigns on their behalf to create positive change. And Indigenous people are more likely to engage and trust information coming from community members or people they love and admire. If they look like you, sound like you, and act like you, there's something to be said about representation in health and other awareness campaigns. Communication can be powerful, and when done properly and effectively, as we've seen in many movements like Idle No More, and to quote Chief Tony, we can make change when we become masters of the institutions laid before us. This felt very much like what he talks about so often. We got the skills we needed, we implemented them properly, and the success was protecting our elders and keeping our community members safe. Thank you. Hi. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Well, and Shani, and I think I'm in your target audience because I saw every single one of those people in my feed. So your message has been effective and has gotten across. So thank you very much. Moving on to our next speaker. To discuss youth, COVID-19, and mental health, we have Autumn Larose Smith from the We Matter campaign. Autumn is a proud queer Métis student who attends Saskatchewan Urban Native Teachers Education Program in Saskatoon and currently works for We Matter as the program's and outreach administrator. Autumn, the floor is yours.
I was just sharing, I just wanted to share cute pictures of these Indigenous youth, but we can move on to the next slide. All right, so I'll introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Autumn Larose Smith. I am a Métis student at the University of Saskatchewan in the SUNTEP program. I have been a part of We Matter for a little over 3 years now. I was an Ambassadors of Hope for 3 years, which I will touch on what that is a little bit further down in this presentation, before getting hired by We Matter as the programs and outreach administrator. Before working with We Matter, I was previously elected the president of the University of Saskatchewan Students' Union, representing almost 20,000 undergraduate students during the pandemic, and was the first Indigenous woman to be elected into this position. And then prior to that was the vice president, student affairs. So working with university students for the majority of the pandemic. We can go to the next slide. So what is We Matter? So We Matter is a national nonprofit that is Indigenous youth led. And these lovely people here that you're seeing on the screen, that is Kelvin and Tunchai Redvers. They are the co-founders of this organization and from Northwest Territories. They had started this organization back in 2016 because they wanted to create a platform for Indigenous youth to feel represented and to see messages of positivity and hope and strength in the media, which is something that they weren't seeing and that we still don't necessarily see all the time today. Next slide. So in 2016, I'm just pulling up my slides here too for reference. Like I mentioned, We Matter had launched and had reached almost 10 million people within the first year, which is absolutely incredible, an incredible reach for its first year of launching. In 2018, they hosted the first ever Hope Forum with the Ambassadors of Hope. They had over 70 Ambassadors of Hope attend that Hope Forum, which led to creating 11 calls of action for We Matter, and also the Hope Council, which went on to lead We Matter in how we were moving forward in working with Indigenous youth, as well as providing training and workshops for the next Hope Forum, which was the one that I had attended. And then in 2021, this year, our fourth round of our COVID support fund is being launched, and we are also celebrating We Matter's 5th year celebration in October. You can go to the next slide. So the We Matter campaign, there's 3 components really of We Matter, 3 large components of We Matter that we take on outside from a number of partnerships and workshops. And the main thing is the We Matter campaign. So again, wanting to provide an online platform to share hope, culture, strength, messages of hope and healing, and to inspire and to to be a representation of the hope that Indigenous youth can bring and that Indigenous youth can see. So this is for anybody who wants to go to our website or any of our social media pages. They can access videos from all over Canada. And actually we have submissions from Indigenous people internationally and non-Indigenous people as well, talking about their journey and providing messages of hope to Indigenous youth and reminding them that they matter and that they can see themselves through the hard time, offering advice and uplifting messages. We can go to the next slide. So the Ambassadors of Hope, so I was an Ambassador of Hope for 3 years, and the first Hope Forum hosted 70 Ambassadors of Hope, and then I think in my year it was around 45 or 50. And so this is Indigenous youth from all across Canada who are considered change makers in their community and want to provide messages of hope and bring that healing back into their own community. Where we were brought to Winnipeg for a week-long training that would allow us the opportunity to provide different types of workshops within our community about hope, culture, and strength, and also use the We Matter resources that were developed, such as the youth toolkit or the teacher toolkit, support worker toolkit. And then we recently in 2020 created a kids toolkit to address the youth suicide epidemic, the age getting younger and younger. So our toolkits are for 12 and up, and then our kids are for 11 and under. And so we can go to the next slide. I just have a video here from a previous Ambassador of Hope.
My name is Mary Modeste. I'm from Duncan, BC. I currently live at the Late Tenay Territory. That's Prince George, BC. I'm Frog Clan and Thunderbird Clan. And I was struggling with really bad addiction with alcohol and using some other types of drugs. I went down to the fire pit and talked to an elder down there, and we were talking for a bit, and she told me to keep on going in life. And just talking to an elder will help you to go on the right pathway. And sometimes life gets hard, but you can keep on going. Don't give up, because everybody cares about you. And you're a warrior. You should stay strong. Talk to an elder or like a teacher or somebody that you really care, because I matter, you matter, we matter.
Awesome. So that's kind of what a typical message looks like on our website. And we have probably close to 500 videos varying in 7 seconds.
My name is Mary Modeste.
7 seconds to about 5 minutes long, depending on who wants to speak. And then we also have them organized by different challenges that people might be facing, different demographics, right down into their community. So as a queer Indigenous youth living in Saskatoon, I could actually go and type in those kind of describing factors and find videos of other queer Indigenous youth in Saskatoon sharing messages of hope to hopefully uplift and inspire and provide that advice and guidance on a peer-to-peer level. So the Ambassadors of Hope, so we do the week-long Hope Forum. We also do monthly meetups virtually, and then monthly socials, and then host a number of events. So what that looked like during COVID, sadly, we weren't able to meet in person, but we did still host a week-long Hope Forum training virtually through Zoom for our new cohort of Ambassadors of Hope that we just took on this year. And that training took place in July. And it went over phenomenal. One of the main components of it was that we just wanted to ensure that Ambassadors of Hope had the ability to show up in whatever way that they could. So if they needed their camera off, if they were driving, if they were on the bus, the main point was that they were there and they were absorbing that information and training in one way or another. And then the monthly socials and monthly meetups have always taken place virtually through Zoom. And so that allowed us to kind of ease into it with the COVID year. The first, when COVID first kind of came to Canada, we weren't able to host the Hope Forum just because of nobody really knew what was going on during that time. It was a very scary time, but we did kind kind of break that training session up throughout the monthly meetups. And what those look like are what either a We Matter team member or a partnering organization will offer some type of professional development or training to help the Ambassador of Hope go back into their own community and provide those different types of workshops. And then the events are Ambassador of Hope led for the most part. So a lot of times we will get organizations reaching out to us, and if they, for example, World Suicide Prevention Month is this month, as well as Truth and Reconciliation Day happening at the end of the month. And so a number of people will reach out to us and request or see if there's an Indigenous youth that we work with who wants to speak at their event or provide some sort of workshop at their event. And of course, all of these opportunities are paid opportunities for Indigenous youth, as well as the professional development that they receive and experience. And it really is to target their interests. So we've had Ambassadors of Hope who have had an extreme interest in fashion. They host fashion workshops. If they really love to bead, they'll host a beading workshops, or if they really love makeup, they've done like makeup workshops. So really just doing events in their own community and finding a way to weave hope, culture, and strength within everything that they do to bring that healing back where it's needed. We can go to the next slide, please. So our Indigenous Youth Rise COVID-19 Support Fund. So originally, We Matter planned to launch a mini grant program for Indigenous youth. And then COVID hit. So they quickly redesigned and created the COVID-19 Support Fund for Indigenous youth. And what this looks like is Indigenous youth who have an idea can apply for funding and support. So this isn't a program where they just get the money and then they go off on their own. We do work with the Indigenous youth to ensure that they have that support in their community, or how we can connect them with other people to really empower the Indigenous youth to take on whatever initiative that they're wanting to do. So we have had 3 cohorts of the support fund so far, and we are just launching our 4th. And we can go to the next slide as well. So as you can see, we've given thousands of dollars away to Indigenous youth. And so what this looks like is if an Indigenous youth, for example, we've had beading workshops, language workshops, and lessons or classes that Indigenous youth have put on. Some of them have put on podcasts that they want to kind of interview elders within their community during COVID. A lot of Indigenous youth have applied for funding to create care packages for members of their community with food and clothing and masks and cleaning supplies for people that they know who are in need, or working with a local community organization that they can kind of partner so that they the youth aren't just going out onto the street and handing them to whoever they see, but there's a bit of a safety aspect that we kind of help them with, or a lot of times that they would apply through that. And this really kind of took off, as you can see, 61 applicants for the first round. So you'll see a variance in the amount funded. So the first 2 rounds were $500 they received, and then round 3 they received $1,000, and then round 4 they're actually receiving $1,500 for the workshop for the initiative that they want to put on. And this is really to let Indigenous youth truly be the leaders in their own community that they already are, and provide that funding, but also during a time of helplessness that I think we're all experiencing. This is kind of taking back some control and providing that support and doing something good within our own community to help take our minds off of scary things that might be happening and the feelings that we might be having. So we can go on to the next one. So Indigenous youth led. So I put meet them where they're at. I always forget that I'm an Indigenous youth as well when I'm doing this work. So meet us where we're at. And you'll see throughout all of the initiatives and programming that We Matter has done, there's the theme of youth-led has been a part of all of them. So for example, we're celebrating our 5th anniversary, and we have a committee leading that who are Indigenous youth and different members of We Matter throughout the years to be a part of it. So meeting us where we're at, not disciplining us if we're not showing up in the way that you were expecting us to, but allowing us to come in any way, because at least we're joining, fostering that creativity and imagination. So creating space for them to share ideas and really empowering them to take on the leadership of that idea, and supporting that Indigenous youth to really make it happen. And then empowering and support. So the Indigenous youth who have the idea, but they don't necessarily have the time and resources like I do as a staff member. So working with them, allowing them to come up with the idea, and then on my end doing the nitty gritty work, the boring work, the emailing in the background, so that they can continue on with life in school, but they're still seeing their idea come to fruition, and they're still having that control and that sense of pride at the end when it comes to completion. So especially during COVID-19, what we've seen is that there's been a lot of Indigenous youth who've reached out to us because they feel like they want to help in some way. They just really aren't sure how. So meeting with them and talking it out, and really asking what their gifts are, what they think their gifts are, and then playing to those. So if you are somebody who is really talented at drawing and you love to draw, then how can we help empower this gift in a way that supports other people in your community? And we'll kind of brainstorm ways, especially during COVID-19 when things can be really isolating. So that is kind of all the time I have for today, and hopefully you can join me for the discussion session.
Thank you, Autumn Larose Smith, for that presentation on youth, COVID-19, and mental health. Our next speaker is here to discuss supporting homeless First Nations during COVID-19. Mckay is the Executive Director of the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal. She's Cree from Lac La Ronge, Saskatchewan, and was adopted by a Jewish family in Montreal, and draws on her adoptee experience and her advocacy work for Indigenous children in care. Mckay created, produced, and hosted a television series, spoke at various important events, and testified at both the Afen Commission here in Quebec, as well as the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry, among other important endeavors. She's dedicated to improving the lives of urban Indigenous people, and once again, here to talk about supporting homeless First Nations during COVID-19. Mckay, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. So just as sort of a bit of a background into the work that I do, I know that I was introduced as the Executive Director of the Native Women's Shelter, but living in Montreal, and seeing how a lot of Indigenous people come off reserve into the city, we probably have somewhere around 50,000 Indigenous people living in Montreal. You sort of have to step up and do more. And so I'm just going to do a little bit of background and then jump into what we did during COVID. So next slide, please. Okay, so I work at the Native Women's Shelter, but I'm very much involved with the Cabot Square Park. So this is a park where a lot of Indigenous people hang out in the city. There's no like reservation. You have Gunawage or Gunasatagi, those are the closest ones. All the Indigenous people that come down usually go to Cabot Square. So I created a project there called this Cabot Square Project, and then we noticed that when an important organization left the community, the area, that there were a lot of deaths. There was probably about, within a 3-month period, there's probably about 8 Indigenous people that died. Therefore, I did a lot of reaching out through media about what was going on. And then it was decided that they were going to help, the city was going to help create a solution. Next slide. Next. Okay, so the solution was Resilience Montreal, which is a day shelter that helps Indigenous people. However, we allow non-Indigenous people to also come in. It's for everyone, but it's really focused on Indigenous people, Inuit, especially because that's the largest population that come in. And we ended up having an enormous amount of support to create the building. We had about 150 volunteers. Next slide. So this is what the shelter looks like. Next slide. You can see that it's really, really quite busy. Next slide. And this is people having lunch. Next slide. And we're dog friendly. Next slide. And we also have country food, probably on a weekly basis to help, meet the needs of the Inuit people. Next slide. Okay, so then COVID hits, right? So you have to understand that in Montreal, across Canada, everything shuts down. And when everything shuts down, everyone that doesn't have a home, who is homeless, has nowhere to go. So when all the homeless shelters shut down, everybody ran to resilience because we were like, we're going to stay open. What happened was that there were so many people that showed up that we realized that we were going to get shut down by the government if we did not apply the 6 feet apart social distancing. And there was no way that we could do it within the building. The building is not that large, and we were really, really concerned. So I had spoken out a lot about this. I know that like in third world countries, when there's some kind of disaster, people come in, the Red Cross comes in, they build these tents, and you're able to help the people. So I've been very vocal about this point. Next slide. So I was like talking to the people in government. I'm like, why don't you have a tent? And then be like, what happened during, the tuberculosis crisis, have people, lying down, we'll give them blankets, we'll keep them warm. And that way they'll have somewhere to go. But then it was sort of like crickets because nothing was really happening. So we got to the point at Resilience where we were thinking, all right, well, we don't want to get shut down. All the staff are really motivated to do their job. What can we do to help the people? We decided to just go across the street and do all our services outside at Cabot Square. Next slide. So this is the beginning. When we just started to go outside, we brought all the food outside. We brought the workers outside. We brought clothing and everything else that they could possibly need outside, and we served them during the day. And then the city was sort of like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be outside. And I'm like, well, what's the alternative, right? We have to do something. So next slide. So this is still us operating kind of rogue, doing it ourselves. This is super early in the morning, so not too many people have showed up. Next slide. And then the city was sort of, within a week, they're like, you know what, maybe this is what we should do. We should have homeless parks throughout Montreal. So they ended up having 5 homeless parks. And then they came in, and instead of having, like, I always told them I want one big tent. Well, what they ended up doing was having about 25 small little tents, which wasn't ideal, but they ended up stepping up. Next slide. So now you can see the red tents. These are the city's tents. And what we needed to do was educate the homeless population, because you have to understand that they don't have access to phones. Maybe a third of the clientele that are homeless only have phones. So all the messages that people were hearing on the news about COVID, they were not getting that information, right? Next slide. So we would always, offer them really supportive words as well. And we had posters under almost every single tent to give them resources. Where are the night shelters they can go to? Where are the places where, you can get testing and just everything that they needed to know. We had it there on a daily basis. Next slide. Yeah, and we love them. So we let them know. Next slide. And during holidays, right? So you have to understand that while everyone goes in for like Easter, everyone outside is still outside. So this is Sam. We did an Easter egg hunt in Cabot Square, and we put chocolates everywhere. And this is Sam announcing it to the community that there's an Easter egg hunt. Next slide. And we made the best food. So we would make the food at Resilience Montreal and then bring it across. So this is Sam doing his cheeseburgers. Next slide. And also we got a lot of donations. So we gave out cupcakes and cookies and whatever else, that people wanted to donate, or if we could actually make it ourselves. Next slide. So, in Montreal, when we heard about what was happening, what happened to Joyce Echequan, we were really, really upset. And, this again was, in Montreal, it was called the red zone, right? So we were pretty much on lockdown. We weren't allowed to do any kind of demonstrating or protest. It was considered illegal. But, after what happened to Joyce, when I was at the Native Women's Shelter, some of my staff came in, they were really upset. They really wanted to do something. And I said, listen, the powerful thing that you can do is come together and to share your outrage in a healthy way, where you have different messages from different leaders. And I was able to bring a lot of really amazing speakers to come in. And, I worked with the Montreal police to ensure that it was safe. And we had hundreds of volunteers to make sure that people were social distancing and that we were keeping, the microphones clean. And then I really pleaded with the city, the community of Montreal, right? That people should show up, because I always feel that, actions speak louder than words. So, I wasn't sure how many people would actually show up for this, because we are in the red zone, we're locked down, it's the, the height of COVID, but it was really important to do something. Next slide. And I was so happy with the amount of people that showed up, because literally, right after we finished, or just before we finished this protest, we got a call that CBC had announced that, the provincial government was now going to do an inquest into Joyce Echaquan's death. And I felt like, everyone who was watching what was happening here, that is what kind of pushed the government to be like, okay, we need to take this more seriously, because it's not just the Indigenous people that are outraged, right? We might have, 10% of the people in this march that were Indigenous. Otherwise, it was non-Indigenous. Next slide. That's just a picture of people at the march. Next slide. Other people at the march. It was really cool to see all the drummers. I haven't seen them in forever, but they all showed up, which was awesome. Next slide. And, some of our leaders in the community came, Vivian Michel from Quebec Native Women, Stanley Volant, who was a doctor, a surgeon. Next slide. I only got 5 minutes left. Next slide. There we go. Okay, so, I've been talking since the beginning of COVID about, having, a tent. And unfortunately, on January 17th, an Innu member named Raphael Andre passed away. And he passed away because in Quebec, they decided that they were going to have a curfew and that everyone needed to be indoors. But if you're homeless, you don't have a place to go. So they were going to be penalized for being outside. And we already knew that there weren't enough services during the night. So I kept pleading again to have a tent. And what was really interesting was that Michelle Odette got in touch with me and she's like, you want a tent? She sent me this picture. She goes, here's your tent. I will help you with a tent. Also, I got support from Ian Lafreniere and also from Marion Bart Goodley from Gunawage. And, we decided we were going to put a tent in Cabot Square. We were going to help people that, had no place to go during the winter in Montreal. Next slide. So the city didn't like our tent, our traditional tent, but this is the one that they offered. So this is the tent that we have. We opened this on February the 3rd. It is still standing, right? The issue was that, the city kept saying, you can have it for 2 weeks. And we were like, we need it more than for 2 weeks. And then we would have to keep asking them for longer and longer periods and where we can keep it open. Because we have somewhere between 150 to 250 people that show up every single night. And honestly, we just did the statistics today. Since the beginning of February 3rd, we've had 27,937 people that have shown up to use the tent. Next slide. And what was really nice about this, we called it the Raphael Memorial Tent because no one should die in a porta potty. And that's what happened to Raphael. His name needs to be important and we need to remember him and we need to create better solutions for people that are suffering on the street. Next slide. We had a traditional ceremony that was right just before we opened the tent. Next slide. And then we had our staff come in. And what was really nice was we had a lot of Innu staff that came all the way from Quebec City. Okay, so you have to understand that's a 3-hour drive through a snowstorm to come and to help the homeless population of Montreal. So when we talk again about actions, being louder than words, that's huge. So we had Maison Misinac, a lot of their staff came up and supported the tent from the beginning. We also have a lot of Mohawk staff and some non-Indigenous staff as well in some other nations. We have about 20 staff that support the tent, every single night. Next slide. And that's one of our staff, prior staff. She's gone back to Misinac. Next slide. And this is actually what it looks like in the tent. So, when I talk about the fact that we have 200, people that show up a night, we can only fit in 18 people with social distancing, which means that all the staff are actually outside with the clientele supporting them. And we've been able to help some of those clientele get into treatment centers, get into housing. And they really enjoy the fact that, when they come to the tent, that they see, an Indigenous face. That is really helpful. Sometimes we can speak their language. The thing is that, again, the city wants to remove this tent. And I'm not exactly sure how to get them to see that, it's important that we have something sustainable. So what I've done is, I'm working with this group called Ecosis, which is a consulting firm. And what we're doing is in Quebec, we have 11 nations. Ecosis is writing to every single community and saying, you have people that come from your community, that come to the city. They're very much in danger. And this is the initiative that we have, but we need to have something sustainable. Can you help us? So we have to create this strategy in order to get all the people from the communities to understand what we're doing and to support us, either monetarily, either through HR, whatever it is, just to stand and to create our own strategy. I have a building that I would love to turn into the Raphael Andre Memorial Shelter. And this is kind of how I spend all my days now, is trying to figure out how to do that. There's always a way, though. I'm pretty persistent, and people get tired of seeing my face in Montreal. But, it has to happen. And, so far we've had, Gunawage has written that they were going to support us, which is huge, right? We've also have, the Inuit, we wrote to Peter Atama from Mckay, and he also said he would support us. So, this is what I need to do, is try to get more community support. And I am out of time. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Nak, is exactly on time. Thank you for that. And thank you for all the work you do. I'm based out of Quebec City, so I do follow everything that's being done and recognize the work that you do. Thank you for that. Just as a quick update, guys, we have 2 more presentations, then we'll be going on to a quick break and coming back for the workshops. I'll explain that once we get there. But up next, to discuss their COVID-19 response, we have Carrie O'Soup, the Project Director of Emergency Management at the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. Carrie, the floor is yours.
Howdy. Good morning from Saskatchewan. Deep in the heart of conservative territory. We woke up to the world much the same as it was yesterday. And the only reason I mention that is because, just demographics in Saskatchewan, we are the largest minority, of course, in the province, with 170,000 registered First Nation members. It does not take into account the non-status population nor the Métis population. So we do make up a very large portion of the province. So as we move forward, it's been a little difficult at times with our response. There's a little bit of information, a lot of information that has not gone into my presentation. One of the difficulties that we've experienced here, and why I bring up our demographics here, is because the First Nations have not been seated at the the Emergency Operations Center. We are observers and treated as observers, and I don't think it's proper. We make up 20% of this population, and in the north, it is the majority. So it's difficult at times. In spite of that, just having said that, we wake up to another liberal minority government. We'll see what that brings for us. But I'll just get started on my presentation now. Of course, the pandemic started in March of 2020. It's still in full effect in Canada, and we expected it to end. Of course, our restrictions ended on July 11th in the province. There are no restrictions. Now we've got the mandate for masking back in place, and now we're going to have cards fairly soon, proof of vaccination to be October 1st, so those changes are coming. But vaccines have been made available to the general population, and the race is on to achieve herd immunity. And of course, in Saskatchewan, and you guys are aware of the numbers, we've got a lot of vaccine hesitancy in the mainstream population. I think we're at about 70% provincial vaccination rate. However, our First Nations lag far behind, with 45% of people 12 and up being fully vaccinated. That number is 56% partially vaccinated. So with demand for the vaccine plateauing, uptake has slowed to a trickle because unvaccinated individuals comprise 84% of infections and 95% of those hospitalized from the virus. It is now more urgent than ever that additional strategies and support be provided to First Nations in order to minimize the harm to First Nation communities. During the current worldwide pandemic crisis of COVID-19, FSIN has maintained an active response and effective communication in this pandemic environment. FSIN has endeavored to provide timely, relevant, and practical responses to First Nation communities, both on reserve and off reserve. So we've done that by having regular meetings of our Chiefs Emergency Management Task Force, though that has kind of fallen off over the last few months, but we've tried, and it's been very difficult to coordinate in a pandemic. I think that, just as a side comment, that even the trouble that this group had this morning with logging in was a little bit difficult. We've had direct email communication with all 75 of our First Nations in Saskatchewan. Beginning there, we instituted a 1-800 helpline for communications to make it a little bit easier for our on and off reserve people. We have social media and website updates directly related to COVID-19 and current vaccine messaging. Next slide. We've had radio advertisements promoting the vaccine and good public health practices, social distancing and all that. We've printed radio. We've got printed and radio advertisements published in English, Cree, Dakota, Soda, Dene, Nakota, and Lakota languages. We've got digital billboards and various public advertising in high traffic urban cities, including Saskatoon, Regina, Prince Albert, and Yorkton. Got a lot of infographics for sharing on social media and website to target age groups, audiences about COVID-19. On other pandemic responses to the First that we provided for our First Nations, we provided PPE to all 75 First Nations in Saskatchewan, and to date, that is 22 million non-surgical masks and other various forms of PPE, including hand sanitizer, face shields, gowns. And just on that note, it's not in the notes, but when we're done with our stockpile now, we will have distributed 35 million over 35 million face masks once this stockpile that we got now is exhausted, and that's due to exhaust in January. In terms of food security, we provided over $3 million worth of, this is a typo, $3 million worth of food security has been distributed to the First Nations at crucial points of the pandemic. That's a mistake. It's not supposed to say PPE. Cultural and community events, of course, a lot of our people are very cultural and traditional in Saskatchewan. And it's very important to our communities that those traditional practices continue, especially the prayers for our people. Those are undertaken at these cultural events. So it is very, very important that those things continue. And we've supported those with PPE to ensure that these cultural practices continue while we're in a pandemic. And of course, we want to ensure that those occur safely. So we've done that by providing, once again, PPE on request, wash stations, hand sanitizer, and any other product that we've got at our disposal to ensure the safe continuance of the very important cultural events and ceremonies that take place regularly in Saskatchewan First Nation communities. Next slide. Lessons that we've learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think it's very important here that we do have some understanding. You know, I think a lot of our First Nations, our citizens are aware. You know, we're aware that there's a problem, there's an imbalance. However, it's not really, you know, we've got to have, I believe we have to start keeping data on that, making those statements and having that proof. First Nations have been historically underfunded in all areas of the social envelope, placing First Nation communities at the greatest risk of all sectors of the Canadian population. This underfunding of First Nation communities hurts everybody. It makes our people vulnerable. When one sector of the community is vulnerable, it hurts everybody. Of course, I can go into more detail on that, but due to time, I will not. So due to a high incidence of poverty and a low level of social support services and related health factors, First Nation communities are particularly vulnerable to a wide-ranging impacts from the pandemic. First Nation communities possess a distinct lack of trust for the government, given the history of this country's genocidal policies and practices against First Nations people. And this has been particularly difficult in trying to coax our people into getting the vaccinations, given the history that the residential schools is fresh in the memory of our grandparents and parents of experiments on First Nations children, starvation experiments. They call them nutrition experiments, but the experiments were to see how these children, how little they could feed them to the point of starvation before they died. So, you know, that's very fresh in the memory of our people, and it's hard to get, it's really hard to get that uptake and that trust in First Nations community. And not only that, with the unmarked graves that have been occurring and steadily climbing, again, it's very hard to get that trust that is so needed out there. So, you know, on that point, one of the lessons learned is that I believe, and our executive believe, that there has to be a high level statement of reconciliation that specifically acknowledges that and asks for the trust of the people, because we've got to work together to overcome this thing. And this thing is real. I truly believe that COVID is a real threat, and it's a continuing threat, especially to First Nations people, given the low vaccination uptake. We've got to really stress that and bear that in mind. So having said that, it's very important that First Nations people must be recognized as equal partners in tackling emergency response issues in First Nations communities. Instead of being observers on the sideline, we've got to be recognized as equal partners. So that's one thing that is very important. Next slide. So it's just kind of a conclusion, and there's so much more that I can go on about, but I'll just wrap it up by saying that during the current pandemic, our isolation has helped us to see one another more clearly and completely, and to appreciate our safety and well-being in new ways. Our community's desire is to return to a normal life without fear of infection. The lessons learned from COVID-19 will require further study of the wide-reaching effects and ramifications of the virus on our peoples and our communities. There is no timeline for the living under the cloud of this worldwide pandemic, but the FSIN, along with our First Nation members, stand ready to undertake any strategy necessary to sustain the valuable work in political and social advocacy for our First Nations across Saskatchewan. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soup, for that presentation on the response of the Federation of Saskatchewan Indigenous Nations COVID-19 response. So thank you for that. Now, our final presentation before going into break and then our breakout webinars is from Ryan Mckay and Selena Kern from the Eagle Urban Transition Center at the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. They're here to discuss considerations for First Nations living with disabilities during the pandemic. Ryan Mckay is from the Rolling River First Nations, located in southwestern Manitoba. He's the lead advocate for the Jordan's Principal Officer Advocacy Office and working out of the Eagle Urban Transition Center for the past 5 years. Selena Kern, a 60 Scoop survivor of the child welfare system, originally from Broken Head of Ojibwe Nation in Manitoba, but grew up in Tyrone, Pennsylvania, returned to Canada in 1995. She's a mother, an advocate, and voice for her 16-year-old, assisting him with navigating the school and social services since he was 18 months old. In her spare time, she loves to bead, sew, cook, bake, and take long road trip vacations with her son. So to talk about the considerations for First Nations living with disabilities during the pandemic, Ryan Mckay and Miss Selena Kern, the floor is yours.
Bonjour, everybody. I'd like to say hello to everybody from here in Manitoba. They woke up in the same position we were last year with the election, so not too much difference is happening there. You'll have to excuse my voice. I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm just in recovery mode from a cough due to a cold right now. I'm hoping it's not COVID. I go for a COVID test this afternoon, so please excuse me if I cough during my presentation. Once again, my name is Ryan Mckay. It's been an honor for me to be able to work with the Jordan's Principal out of the Eagle Urban Transition Center, Assembly Manitoba Chiefs here in Winnipeg for the past 5 years. I've kind of grown along with this initiative that the government calls Jordan's Principal. I've been there since the beginning, and I hope that this presentation can give some of the people listening out there some ideas or some kind of leads as to where their offices might be going in regards to Jordan's Principal. Next slide. So we work out of we're an arm length out of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. Again, the Eagle Urban Transition Center was created for people transitioning from the reserve to city life here in Winnipeg. And we always use culturally appropriate programming whenever we work with families here in Winnipeg. Our office, specifically the Jordan's Principal Reserve Advocate Office, was created in 2016, and we were basically there to advocate and assist those families with children who have disabilities in response to the CHRT rulings that came out at that time. We've been growing as an office. We started off with 2 staff, including myself. We've had many people come and go. Now we're up to 10 staff in total at this time. Next slide. So our office, like the goal of our office is we're basically service coordination that functions in Manitoba, and we connect the families with the necessary resources that are available here in Winnipeg. We also work with on reserve case managers who are delivering Jordan's Principle. Here in Manitoba, we kind of have a unique situation where there's case managers for Jordan's Principle through in every First Nation in Manitoba. We're lucky to have our office is unique in that platform, as Winnipeg is the only off-reserve office that I know of delivering Jordan's Principle in an urban setting. We collaborate and we build relationships with many community-based programs throughout Winnipeg. Some businesses we also work with, and of course our service providers. We work in conjunction with Jordan's Principle, Indigenous Services Canada on a daily basis. And we right now we're trying to implement our database to further enhance our data collection and analytical activities. So we can better understand the scope of the children's needs and the nature of the service gaps in which we're allocated to speak on behalf of. Each person and family, each child and family, it goes case by case, and every family that we work with, we present a holistic and collaborative manner in order to lessen the contributing factors that the family is going through. We always use a child-centered approach when we're working with these families. So we put the child in the middle and make sure those needs are met. And then we start off by working with the families afterwards and any other involvement from within that the family is currently dealing with. Next slide. So some of the main support services that are requested through our office, the referral services, again, advocacy is a big thing. We speak on behalf of the family when we're trying to get these resources delivered to the family in a timely process. So we're that bridge between the family and these service providers. Any resources that the family needs, we also interpret if the family is unable to speak in a matter that the medical professionals are speaking them to. So we're able to provide that advocacy. We collaborate with partners both on and off reserve, as mentioned before. We're also family support to the families. Like a lot of the families that we work with, they just need an ear, somebody to talk to. So we play that role as well. We assist with transportation, whether that be cabs or our van. We have an EUTC van. The status registration, where we advocate the ISK on behalf of the families. And a lot of the families that come forth, their children aren't registered yet for their treaty status. So we've started a process where that speeds up, where we have a main contact at our ISK office where we can speed that process up. A big part of our office duties includes short-term respite. A lot of the families that come forward need that respite in order to more time with the child that's in hospital, or more time with the children that aren't in hospital while the other one is. Next slide. So these are our staff. Like I said before, I'm the lead advocate, and we're currently in the process of hiring a support services manager and another intake admin support. We have 6 other advocates that I supervise on a daily basis. And again, Selena Kern has been involved with our office for a while now. She's the support services assistant and kind of my go-to whenever I need assistance immediately or some kind of familiarity in a community resource. Next slide. Next slide. So some of the challenges that we faced, like one of the biggest challenges that we faced was the communication with the family. Um, that was one of our rewards as advocates, was working with the family directly and actually getting to meet the children. And when the children received those services, when the family received those additional services that weren't there before, or they were kind of hitting roadblocks, that was one of the biggest challenges that we faced because we could not meet with the family directly. A lot of our communication was through email, phone calls, Zoom, if the family had laptops that were capable. Um, and just like interacting, like we drop off the intake forms, the consent forms inside their mailboxes. And sometimes our advocates would even wait outside the home until the family filled them out, and they'd work with them. They'd phone them on the cell phone and give them that assistance through the phone to be able to fill out that form properly, and and all the information that we needed on our end was completed thoroughly. So that was one of the major challenges that we had to go through. Alternative community resources, that was a big challenge as well, because a lot of the resources that we were sending our families to shut down as well. So we had to ensure that these families were still taken care of, still, if they needed visitation, if they needed to attend a medical appointment, that was one of the biggest challenges. And it took a lot out of our advocates to be able to assist those families with those needs. But I believe that we completed that in a manner that where we have to, and I'm glad that process was achieved in regards to it took a lot out of the advocates. The advocates did a lot of that work that was necessary. Next slide. The provision of personal protective equipment, again, once COVID hit, we ordered massive amounts of PPE, little kits that contained hand sanitizer, mask, a glove, and we handed them out to all the families that we work with whenever they needed to. So that was ongoing as well. Again, we delivered those to most of the homes. And we also used courier services here in Winnipeg to deliver those as well. Working from home was quite a challenge. We're just returning back to the office right now, but working from home was quite a challenge. And again, meeting with the other staff and bouncing ideas off each other and maintaining that balance between home life and office life was one of the greatest challenges that our office had to go through. So we're kind of glad to be returning back to office, kind of normalizing here in Winnipeg, and at the same time maintaining those COVID safety protocols. Next slide. So the delivery requests and equipment, again, like interacting with the families that we work with was one of the biggest challenges that our office had. We used a lot of courier services that were here in Winnipeg, and we also set up a lot of taxi. We work with this one taxi company here in Winnipeg that was really reliable, and they practiced the safety measures with our families when they needed a ride to their appointments, or when they needed to maybe move some of their respite providers from one household to another. Our next challenge was probably respite. Now, respite was challenging in the fact that a lot of people didn't get the vaccinated right away, and the way we work our respite, we were relying on some of the family members to provide the respite to the families that needed it. But again, the measures were you couldn't just go into somebody's home. So a lot of the respite was put on hold at the beginning, and when the restrictions were put in place, a lot of that respite couldn't happen because you couldn't allow somebody else from a different household into your home. So the respite that did happen was already a close family member or a close friend to the family that was allowed actually into that home. So We overcame that in time. After the provision started lessening, we were able to overcome that piece in regards to respect. Next. Greatest challenge that we faced was the mental health of the families that we work with, and a lot of young people between the ages of 13 and 18 years old came forth. The families came forth with a number of different requests in regards to the depression that they held, the staying at home, not being able to interact with others, those kind of things, and doing all their things through computer or online, and even ourselves, like working from home and being challenged with having our own family responsibilities. We overcame that by, I checked in with all the staff on a weekly basis and, let them know that made sure that they were looking after themselves through self-care, and any other accommodations like smudge and all that was provided to the staff whenever needed. I'm gonna let Selena Kern jump in here before we run out of time, because Selena has a child that is enrolled with our office, and there was a number of challenges that they faced as a family. I'm going to let Selena jump in and she can have some discussion on that.
Hi, thank you, Ryan. Okay, speaking as to kind of go on the whole aspect point of regards to mental health. With my son, he did experience a huge decline with regards to his mental health. For children are sociable. Children are to be able to have that communication with their peers and their friends, and being able to sit in a classroom and learn. So I've seen a decline big time in his mental health in regards to being able to do his schoolwork, being able to be successful. And also with regards to, we had to set up as an action therapist, where his action therapist would come in 2 hours a week to kind of work with, take him out kind of in the community stuff. He didn't get a chance to really spend any time with any of his friends. He couldn't have anybody in the home. I myself was working from home, so having to do my work plus help him with his schoolwork was a huge challenge and a barrier for both of us, because I'm not a teacher. I'm a preschool teacher. I have early childhood education by trade, but unfortunately, when it comes to high school, there's certain things you just can't teach a child. So it was a lot of having to learn how to do those, being a teacher and a parent at the same time. And then accessing services, like Brian had said, was those services that we used to access, we couldn't go to. Like, for example, the gym. We're big gym rats. We love going to the gym. That's our way of getting rid of our stress. And when the lockdown happened, unfortunately, the gym wasn't there. Gyms, unfortunately, the one that I had to go to had shut down. So mental health was a really big, huge area with regards to a challenge facing with children with disabilities and adults with disabilities.
Thanks, Selena. Well, okay, so, I think we ran out of time, and I believe that we tried to cover as much as we can, and I'm hoping that assisted some of the people that are here on this meeting today.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Selena. Of course, after this, we're going to transition towards our breakout rooms, so you guys will be able to interact more with the people who are present and who are listening. So those little details that you want to add are available. Just as a reminder to all of our speakers today, we want to take the time to say Walalin. Thank you to all of you. And also that a donation will be made to the Orange Shirt Society in your name, in lieu of a presenter's gift. So with the time and seeing the hour, we're going to be going directly into our workshops. The way this will work is at the bottom of your screen, you have the choices for the 5 workshops under the screen. If ever you are on the telephone lines, an email was sent out yesterday, you have the meeting IDs and passwords within this email. So just enter those into your telephone once you call that line. We have 5 workshops, and they all correspond to the presentations you saw today: protecting our elders and your health, our strength, youth, COVID-19, and mental health, supporting homeless First Nations during COVID-19, a COVID-19 response, and also considerations for First Nations living with disabilities during the pandemic. So I'll invite you to select the workshop that interests you the most in the bottom of your screen. The workshops will last for about 1 hour, and then we'll come together where the different moderators and staff on hand will give a resume of the presentation so that even if you missed out on the other ones, you still get to hear a bit of what was said. So on to your webinars, and we'll be seeing you in 1 hour. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had the time to rest up, to look away from your screens a bit. We do know that it's pretty difficult after 18 months of this, so hey, we're getting through it, even through the technical difficulties. In order to make sure that everyone gets to hear a bit about each of the different workshops that took place, AFN staff was asked to participate and take notes in each of the workshops. So one by one, AFN staff will come over and tell you what happens. So our first person will be Chris Wong, who works at the Afen health sector and who will report back on workshop number 1, COVID-19 communications, protect our elders and your health, our strength. So Chris. If you could unmute yourself and give us the recap for number 1.
Hi, Bonjour, Christopher Wong, Krishna Kaz. I apologize. Certainly. Bonjour, Christopher Wong, Krishna Kaz. I apologize for the video delay. I've got a bit of an issue with my camera, but
Chris, as you check and try to see what's happening with your internet connection, we might go on then to number 2. So we have Dakota Edwards from the education sector at the AFN, who's reporting back on workshop number 2, Youth, COVID-19, and Mental Health. Dakota?
Thank you, Cedric. I'm Dakota. As Cedric mentioned, I'm in the education or the languages and learning sector at the AFN. I'm Mckay from Listigage, Quebec, and I'm joining you from Ottawa. So I had the pleasure of sitting into the Youth COVID-19 Mental Wellness workshop discussion that was led by Ms. Autumn Larose Smith from We Matter, and we heard a lot of really important resources that We Matter has and shares with schools and teachers. And most importantly, like We Matter explained to us what those main impacts of COVID-19 have really been for this organization in particular. So one of the biggest things was the transition to virtual instead of in-person engagements. They really want to focus on not ever leaving a community behind. And you know, in order to address sort of low bandwidth, they've come up with a lot of really innovative tools and resources that are hard copy that can also be sent to communities and organizations. So another thing that was discussed was what brought all the different attendees to the workshop specifically. So we heard from around the table that there are concerns on how COVID is impacting youth in general, right? So we heard about lack of employment, challenges with buying houses, challenges of the future in general. So a lot of people that were attending just came to really hear what other communities are doing to address these challenges. And then we also heard that organizations like We Matter are, you know, one of their main goals is to really empower youth by giving them the opportunity to utilize their gifts for something that's going to empower others. And then lastly, we heard what other nations and organizations are currently doing to help address mental health needs. So we've heard social media has been a really amazing tool, teaching resources, and of course, in all of this, relying on Indigenous youth to lead these discussions. And then another really big, important tool has been land-based learning. So we've seen that a lot of communities have turned to the land. Youth have shared over and over that their experience going to the land has been really positive for addressing stress, anxiety, and depression. So yeah, and I think I'll leave it at that. Cedric, thank you very much.
Well, in Dakota, and always a pleasure to hear from a fellow Listiga. So awesome. And again, I participated in this workshop too, and I think it's important that we get towards creating systems that accept youth voices as they are, instead of trying to impose our systems on them, really accepting them as they are, as they want to come forward, and really opening ourselves to that. So it was awesome to hear We Matter talk about the different resources they have to make this accessible to everyone. So really, thank you. Might go back to Chris Wong, see if your connection stabilized a bit.
Sure, I'll just stick with the audio for now. I apologize for the video. Once again, I'm Christopher Wong with the Assembly First Nations Health Sector. I work in communications and partnerships, and I had the pleasure of sitting in with the COVID communications workshop with the presentation by Shawnee Gwynn from Gwynn Communications. And thank you to everybody within the workshop for sharing their feedback and for the conversation as well. That was hosted by Justin Lin from the National Collaborating Center for Indigenous Health. And to sort of recap what the conversation was, there was Gwynn Communications put together a multi-pronged communications project based out of Edmonton, Alberta, working with Métis and First Nations communities, which changing narratives and especially targeting marginalized populations, which raised the issue of around what is like the national plan or a national emergency plan, especially around a national plan for communications that would look at both a national perspective and a regional perspective, because a one-size-fits-all approach may not work for everybody. So some of the successes they had from a local or regional perspective was getting doing a very strong outreach program. So coordinating buses and transportation for elders to get their vaccine, targeting messaging specifically around protecting elders, and also to get the youth involved in this process. So working with role models, influencers, and getting them to encourage vaccinations. Unfortunately, the high rates of COVID spread are among unvaccinated populations, particularly around youth. So it's really imperative that youth are involved in this process so that they see themselves within the messaging. Throughout this process, there's been a lot of questions, but also a lot of successes and challenges, questions around when will booster shots become available? Right now, they're just becoming available to vulnerable populations, specifically elders with pre-existing medical conditions such as diabetes. But to get these people to get their vaccinations, there's challenges around accessibility, remoteness. Do they have internet or telephone access? So even going back to some of the local grassroots kind of initiatives, even going door to door, house to house, doing wellness checks are incredibly important, just so that everybody's reached and nobody's left behind. With the discussions around national emergency plan, there are questions around how would it work, how do we get people on board, and how do we take in regional perspectives, and also how do we set up making mobile clinics available for elders or people in vulnerable populations that don't have access to these clinics because of their geographical location or their accessibility needs. So it's working together both with urban centers and First Nations to coordinate this and to get funding available for people who've lost their jobs that have opportunities. There are opportunities for them to be involved in this process. There was an issue raised about attacking some of the misinformation around the conspiracy theories that are rampant, and working with youth as well to challenge some of these stereotypes and some of the misinformation coming out so that we can address vaccine hesitancy. I'll leave it at that for now, as I see that my time's coming up, but thank you again for sharing your discussion. Thank you much.
Well, Chris. Our next person who'll bring back will be Jordan Fisher, who works in the Housing and Homelessness Department. And he'll be reporting back on workshop number 3, supporting homeless First Nations during COVID-19. Jordan?
Tanse, Jordan Fisher Netigason. Thanks, Cedric. Like Cedric mentioned, I work with the housing and homelessness sector at the AFN. I'm a member of Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan, and I'm currently talking to you from Edmonton and Treaty 6 territory. So I had the privilege of sitting in on the workshop with Nakuset on the impact of COVID-19 on homelessness, on homeless communities, as well as her work to advocate for supports and services in Montreal. So Nakuset talked about the supports that are needed for those who move away from their communities and into the city. She talked about how in Montreal specifically, there's a lack of education in the schools about the 11 First Nations that are in the area, and that the general public is not educated about First Nations, and that many people only hear about Indigenous communities in terms of crisis, and that there's a lot of systemic racism, racial profiling, and a lack of education that impact these issues in Montreal specifically, especially for those who don't speak French. Then she talked about her work with the Raphael Andre Memorial Tent, how that service will be closing in December, and that they're looking for a building for a more permanent solution. She mentioned that Raphael Andre, who was an Innu man who died because of the lack of access to shelter due to the curfews because of the pandemic, how his death can't be just another statistic, and how doing nothing about it would be a form of negligence. So she's looking to the chiefs of the nearby First Nations for their support to help create a kind of buy-in from the city, because according to her, the chiefs have a different kind of power that the city and the government recognizes, which helps to create legitimacy for the advocacy work that they're doing. So the chiefs have been supportive of this, and Nakuset mentioned how they'll be bringing forward a concrete solution, kind of prefabricated to the city, and that often that's what's needed to be done in terms of presenting solutions to city and government, kind of presenting them kind of already developed on a platter, so that they can just take that work and implement it. She also mentioned that more Indigenous representation is needed within the city administration, that those types of positions, Indigenous relations type positions, should be filled by Indigenous people. She talked about the training that is given in institutions on Indigenous issues, how some of that training isn't enough, that there should be maybe even an exam for those who take part in that kind of training. Her idea was to maybe have an oral presentation to a group of elders at the end of the training to make sure that they understood the training and know what they're talking about afterwards. She talked about how the Viens Commission to address systemic racism in public services came up with 142 recommendations, and although some of them are supposedly implemented, the change is still not being seen. She also talked about the supports that are needed during future waves of the pandemic or other public health crises, like housing first approach that needs to be, or how the housing first approach without supportive housing isn't enough, that people need to have additional supports, looking at trauma as an approach to heal. She talked about how First Nations should provide support to their members in the city, maybe have community representatives. And I see that I'm out of time, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jordan. Well on for that. For our 4th workshop, COVID-19 response, we have Jonathan Dunn from the Afen Health Sector with his report back. Jonathan.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Dunn, a member of the Mississauga First Nations in Northern Ontario, but I'm joining you from Montreal. It's a nice sunny day today, and it's the traditional unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people. So I sat in Kerio Soup's workshop. He opened the floor with the FSIN organization's main challenges And as everyone is probably aware, Saskatchewan is in the midst of the worst COVID wave yet. So we covered a lot of topics, so I apologize if I don't get this in order. But first topic was addressing the low vaccination uptake. And we discussed potential strategies to encourage uptake. We looked at incentives as being positive and explored some recent examples in the area. We also discussed about the implementation of vaccine passports and how that might be a positive uptake. We looked and discussed about the role of traditional medicines, as this is a topic with some of our traditional people, and that we should be seeking a duality of Western medicine and also Indigenous medicine. We discussed the real issue of COVID fatigue and how we need to take a break to avoid burnout. It was in the conversation, it was a real reminder that everyone has been affected with a various degree, but we need to take time to really step back and take care of ourselves. Carrie discussed about the non-distinctions based approach Saskatchewan has been taking, which has been a real huge barrier for FSIN to really advocate for First Nations and non-status, both urban and on reserve. So that came up to one of the bigger topics of trust. With the historical and intergenerational trauma, many people don't trust the government, they don't trust any institution and are wary of the vaccines. And there's this adherence to conspiracy theories. So he talked about or stressed the need for an apology to address the past and the present to help. And this would help people to see the vaccination as a safe way or a safe approach to protect yourself against COVID-19, because with the history of medical experimentations. And to follow up with the apology, actions would be required. There was discussion about there's this need to combat systemic underfunding. And this places a huge limitation on FSIN's efforts and other Indigenous programs to mitigate the issues of COVID-19. But funding would be substantially helpful, even more at the community level. We discussed about how, what is recovery, and Carrie defined it on a more epidemiological point of view, but we also have to look at the social determinants, and that's what he addressed. He looked at poverty, intergenerational housing. These are all things that have been exacerbated COVID-19, but they need to be still addressed and not forgotten after COVID-19. So that is basically an overview of what we discussed. So thank you.
Well, and Jonathan. And finally, last but not least, for our report back on the workshops, we have Mary Frawley-Henry from the Afen Health Department reporting back from workshop number 5, Considerations for First Nations Living with Disabilities During the Pandemic. Mary?
Miigwech, Cedric, and colleagues, participants. Also, I want to give appreciation and thanks for the accessibility services we are hearing and having today, particularly the ASL interpreters, and how we are moving towards more accessibility. And this is what our workshop was about, is creating more accessible nations and bringing back to the circle, the sacred circle, all of the needs and services and programs for all persons of all abilities. And we had the pleasure of hearing from Ryan Mckay and Selena Kern, who are Jordan's principal officer of advocates. They are doing a tremendous work along with us, many other advocates across the country, to support key services programs and to bring back home services supports again for patients of all abilities. Some of the key areas of the highlights of our presentation includes some of the work that needs to be done around the aging out, and so many of the young people that are aging out now the advocacy work, aging out of Jordan's principle, and the advocacy work for young people and young adults and adults, more services and programs and advocacy around the needs to do that, which has brought up the need to bring a case before the tribunal to address the unmet needs of adults with disabilities to access equitable and safe, culturally supportive programs and services for First Nations again. And some of the key tools that were brought forward that we need to be more aware of is the age of majority planning. And so it's a key tool to assess what are the needs of citizens and persons with special needs and other needs and how better to navigate with this tool through the system so that we can have this tool better bring awareness to this tool much more. So there is a need for that age of majority planning across. We heard from both Ryan and Selena that we need to have they do work within a delivery service platform that is very person-centered, a child-centered approach, supports for culturally safe programs and services and access to culture and land and the healing components of our nation's well-being. So many of the grandparents, sometimes the grandparents are looking after up to 6 grandchildren and or more, and supports for caregivers. It's often not heard in. So we need to really create some systems changes. Everyone, bringing back everyone to the. We heard of the pandemics and other epidemics and climate change and evacuation and emergency and fires, and how this is really exacerbating stress and post-traumatic stress across the nation. And the need to better have systems in place, planning in place for address these emerging needs, and storage places for storage during evacuation of supplies, equipment, food, the need for addressing citizens, and I see my time is moving away very quickly, needs to vaccination issues and those coming out of First Nations needing to access cards. So much to say, but so much good things came out of this work.
Thank you, Mary. So that is the overview for the 5 workshops that took place today. And again, we just want to make sure that we understand that this may elicit certain emotional responses, and with the times that we've been through, that there are feelings that can be present during these days and during these topics. So just want to remind you that you do have access to the Hope for Wellness helpline. You can either go and call them at 1-855-242-3310, or else you can go online and chat with someone at hopeforwellness.ca. The information again is all on screen here. It's there, use it. And a lot of the times you can get access to services within our own languages. So really a resource created by ISK for our people. And if you need it, it's there. Don't be shy. Just want to take the time to thank everyone who came here today, everyone who participated in our event, who was with us, who got through the technical difficulties. It's one of the realities that we have. But again, we got here, we're on time, everything worked out. For the presentation that was skipped, Dr. Fuller, we will be having something prepared. The Afen staff is working on that to make sure that her presentation, her knowledge will be shared with you and made available. Again, for those who want to rewatch any of the presentations or who want to see any of the available documents, it is all available on the Afen website on the COVID-19 virtual forum page. And then I would also like to take the time and just talk about what we heard today. So our staff did it, but making sure the themes that come back, we're adapting the different realities and adapting the different systems to the needs that are specific, whether it be for people who are homeless, people who are aging out of a system, people who have specific needs. We also talked about the involvement of people. So not making decisions for people, but involving them in the decision-making process. opening ourselves to their knowledge, opening ourselves to the ways that they express themselves, and really going forward with that. On day 3 of our forum, which will be taking place on Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will be talking about the next steps, what comes next, and how do we move forward? How do we build back better with the knowledge that we have? And again, with all the sharing that we did, how can we go forward and make a better place for those who are coming after? I'd like to now take the time and hand it over to our knowledge keeper, Gwen Point, to help us close off this meeting in a good way. Knowledge keeper Point.
Cedric, to Afen staff, and to all the presenters. I was zooming in and out of the sessions, and people always ask me, my background is education. And the questions I would get over the years is people would ask, what can I do? How can I help? And one of the key answers, of course, is not without us. That we have to be part of the answers. We have to be included in the work being done for our families and our communities. And I've heard that in some of the sessions. And Cedric, you gave a good overview, a really good overview, a big picture of the discussions. And again, I just thank you. I thank you for your good work. And listening to the people is heartwarming. It really is heartwarming. And I think of the elders, they would tell us when we were younger, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. To they would thank you for listening. You're being guided and you listened. Not easy. It's not easy. But it makes a difference for our families and our community. They also told us you're not allowed to get tired. You're not allowed to feel sorry for yourself. That you have your work at hand to do. One of the best things the elder told me when I was in the trenches, when I was washing dishes after a big gathering, and everybody was tired, including me. And the elder said, you know, you're going to be standing here when you're an old lady, he said. He said, unless you turn around and teach those young girls, bring them over here and teach them how to work. So I encourage you to do that as well. Turn around and bring forward some of those and teach them how to be helpers, teach them how to work, teach them how to give back. You are a good example, but the other part of it is teaching others to do what you're doing. And I've seen some of that as well in the presentation. So Afen, I thank you, Afen staff. To our presenters, I thank you. To all those listening, I thank you. And we have a responsibility in our area, we call it to witness. And I'm going to take back what I heard to my family and my community and to my leadership. And I'm sure they're going to be reaching out to some of you. Don't be surprised to hear from BC. So with that, the greatest gift you can give is time. And one of the greatest resources is self and being selfless. So I thank you for that. And I want to do a thank you song. And it's appropriate. I'm in Musqueam territory. This song comes from my husband's family. And the elder was 100, over 100. I don't know if he was 110, 108. But he called my husband and his brothers over, and he said, learn this song, sing this song, teach it to your children. And the song goes, when they dance, they put their hands out, showing the Creator all that He's given us, including you today. Then they cross their arms, they bow their heads, and they back up, a sign of being humble. And he said, no matter how great you think you are, or how great you become, there's always one greater. Teach that to your children and remind yourself as adults to be humble. Then he put his hands up again to give thanks for the day and for each one of you. And this is the song, and special blessings to each one of you. And I can tell you this, if you forget everything else, for all that you've done, when you give without expecting anything back, it's like you have a good luck coin in your pocket. So when you're struggling, when you're having a hard time, reach for that and hold it to make you strong again. Ian, this is the song. Oh, 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 he know, he know, he know, he know, he know, oh, he know, he know, oh, no, no. Oh, oh, no, 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 oh, no, no. Oh, no, no. Rest of your day be wonderful. Thank you.
Malala, Knowledge Keeper Gwen, and always an honor to receive that knowledge from you and receive your sharing. So thank you. So now this brings us to the end of day 2. Thank you, Knowledge Keeper Gwen, for having lowered our fire. We'll be seeing you guys September 23rd, next Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, same time as today, for our third day on Building Back Better. Remember to wash your hands, remember to wear your masks, and again, let's #protect our elders. Thank you for participating today. Thank you for being here. Walalio, everyone.